It's Mobin time, D! What's up, fellow procrastinators? I'm FlameCom. I'm about 170-ish hours into the game, loving the game so far. I'm still finishing off a few side quests here and there. It's my game of the year. And now that it's been a month, as of the time of this recording, that the game has come out, I've had more time to sort of gestate the ideas now that the initial honeymoon period is over. And I'm going to echo a sentiment I've seen shared online, which is that the main cast is possibly the most well-written of the trilogy. Sorry, X. But the story, despite still being really good with some really good ideas, is still the weakest of the three. Mainly, it has some pacing issues, especially from chapter 6 onwards, and arguably even before. And the villains, despite having a really kick-ass battle theme, the villains aren't as nuanced or well realized as the first two games. And so one of the villains that we're going to be talking about is this guy right here, this bloke, Mobius D. The big bad that we were led to believe that he was from the way the game was introduced and all the trailers and so on. The Passage of Fate guy, Mr. Wild Ride. I just had to think for a second there. Yeah, the big bad we were led to believe but ultimately wasn't. So why isn't he as compelling of a villain as, say, Jin, or Lao, or Amalthus, or Egil, or Mumkar? Well, simply put, there's really not too much depth to D's character. We learned that he was an Agnian soldier in an unspecified pastime that went mad with bloodlust, and he decapitated friends and foes alike, and and then kept their heads in a jar, and that's about it. As far as motivations go, he's not really driven by an ideology or revenge because he was wronged in the past. He's not going after a high ideal or anything, nor was he sort of like repressed in the past and he was like powerless in the past, so he wants to just like get back at the people that wronged him or anything like Shania was. All we really get is that he's just gone insane, and he just gets like catharsis from violence, basically, bloodlust. His story is pretty bare bones, and there aren't any character arcs or ideological parallels with our main characters, our main cast, that make us sort of empathize with his reasonings or anything. None of that. The quick flashbacks that were shown with him keeping heads in a jar is just thrown in there for like a quick shock value. What we're shown is that D is whose name is Dirk, by the way. He went mad with bloodlust. But the flashback that we're shown happens in an unspecified pastime, and the heads that he keeps in a jar, they're just nameless NPCs, rather than the heroes and the colonists that we met along the journey. Like, imagine if he was shown to have decapitated someone so pure and innocent like Fiona. That would be shocking. So there's a bit of a disconnect, as there's no implications or substantial threats to our present day characters. Even Uni back at the Keves castle in the same cutscene admitted that yes, she was initially scared of him, traumatized even, but she got over it. And not to be dismissive, but the Uni that Mobius D here killed was a Uni in a past lifetime, so it doesn't mean anything in the now. As a side note, I personally would have preferred if they spread out this subplot of Uni being, like traumatized by Mobius D, like they spread it out a bit more throughout the story, where her initial battle with Mobius D ends in failure, but then in subsequent follow-up, she slowly starts to build more confidence and get over her trauma. And eventually, in like a final showdown, we're shown that Uni finally triumphs over him. So like we as the audience root for Uni to overcome her struggles for like a big payoff. But anyhow, circling back to the disconnect that I mentioned, Tyon mentions that he read about Mobius D in a textbook. And mind you, this happens in the same cutscene where they defeat him. So beforehand, there was never any build-up, there wasn't any mystery or threat that was looming in the air. Like, it's just words on a textbook. And the menacing name that they give him is not really all that menacing. Like, even now, I'm looking through my notes, and I cannot for the life of me remember what he nicknamed himself. The something Dirk. That's how forgettable it is. There's no substance to the adjective. Like, there aren't any rumors or whispers in the air throughout the colony. People talking under the breath about how entire colonies were vanquished by mysterious forces or anything. No, none of that. I mean, except for Colony 5 that got raised to like gold rank, but then that got, massacred by a different Mobius. Mobius D's nickname does not get mentioned until that very last cutscene. So he's not widely known for his bloodlust and his cruelty, and if anything, that scene with Tyan goes to demonstrate that he's just been relegated to the history books and that his name is all but forgotten to the wind. So as a result, his threatening presence, despite his nasty teeth, nobody remembers him except for the most studious of people. Furthermore, there isn't any build-up to when he will show up again. Like, he will just appear very suddenly and then, oh, we have to fight him already, okay. There's no cutscenes leading up to him sort of like being just around the corner, and then our characters are like, I feel like we're being watched. Be on your guard, guys, but I can't put this into words, but I feel like we're being tailed.
Oh, it's nothing. Just my imagination.
No, none of that. He just goes, oh, here I am, boom, let me shoot my, my pointy thing. To me, what it feels like is that the writers realized they didn't plant enough seeds and build him up throughout the duration of the game. So when we got to the final confrontation, the writers tried to throw in something last minute to make him seem like he's a really big deal and so on. But as a result of that, it just made that quick flashback scene feel very cheap and very rushed. And even when he shot Queen Nia, we're shown that Nia survived the ambush. So once again, we're shown that Mobius D's actions don't have lasting consequences. So we as the audience don't ever think that he poses a legitimate threat. We don't ever think, ooh, maybe some of the characters and the friends we made along the way will fall to his blade or whatever. Compare this to when Consul N and the fake Melia threatened to wipe out Colony 4 with the Annihilator. That moment when the image of Colony 4 showed up on that big projector, it was more impactful because we, the audience, were thinking, oh crap, our actions could have legitimate consequences to the friends that we made along the way. Maybe we need to rethink our strategy. Maybe we can't just go around smashing flame clocks wantonly. And Ethel and Boliaris are in the same room as Consul N and Fake Melia. They're in danger. So anyways, with all that being said, let's look at the first Xenoblade game. Why was Momka more compelling of a villain than Mobius D? I mean, like, they've got the same weapon choice or and all that, with the Wolverine thingos or stuff, or Vega from Street Fighter, I think. Yeah, so it's clear that the writers wanted to make Mobius D like a Momka villain archetype, same weapons and all that. But they failed to make him as compelling. And why is that? Well, simply put, Momka is the main instigator of the hero's journey in the first Xenoblade game. Throughout the story, Momka's atrocities are compounded on and reinforced. He kills Shulk and Ryan's childhood friend Fiora. He attacks Colony 9 and he brings death and misery to the very place that he used to reside in. He betrays Dunban, and the two of them were brothers in arms in war, along with Dixon. And Fiora was Dunban's sister, no less. He kills Emperor Saurian, Melia's father, and after the revelation that he's Momka, he hunts and he hurts Silverface. So we witness firsthand the reasons for going after Momka. For our protagonist, the motivations are personal and, by extent, to the wider community. It makes us root for our characters even more, which is why when he eventually gets vanquished, it works because it serves as a closure for multiple characters, and multiple characters' motivations were intertwined with each other. This reminds me of something that actress Denise Chan said in a podcast, and she was talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, which is that when you have multiple villains, it's kind of necessary that some of the villains actually are not as nuanced. Having too many villains with the same degree of complexity may actually end up sucking the oxygen out of the room. And as a result, there is no central antagonistic force that really grounds the audience into a story that is like cohesive and has a clear trajectory. Now, I do have to clarify, I'm not saying that a revenge tale is the only way to write an effective Momka villain archetype. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all, but it has to be said that Momka was the reason that the story of the first Xenoblade game was so easy to follow. It was an easy to follow trajectory where multiple characters had similar goals and motivations for going after him. All these goals and character motivations were intertwined into the central plot. And then as the world and the lore expanded, they were able to transition that revenge narrative into the bigger picture. So the audience wasn't whiplashed because they had a solid foundation to start with. So the motivations were kept a bit centralized. Our characters were united by a common goal. Whereas in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it just feels like you have too many villains, too many consuls and Mobiuses, Mobii, what have you, whatever the plural of Mobius is. Even though Mobius already means infinite, whatever. Yeah, it just feels like you have too many villains vying for the villain spotlight, trying to outdo each other in terms of their cruelty, their sadism, their inhumanity, and, well, them just going on a power trip, basically. By the time you get to Mobius D, you've already hit Mobius number 57. It's not as shocking anymore because you get told over and over again how cruel all the Mobiuses are. Lands at one point in the Ascension quest for Juniper in Mactha Forest was just like, wow, we've encountered some really messed up people and evil people, but this Mobius just takes the biscuit. And then I'm just sitting here, like in this chair, just thinking like, are you sure about that? Now, yeah, I mean, you may say, okay, at the beginning of the game, when he kills Moamba, he kills Hacked by squishing them like grapes. And then you may say, like, Mobius D was keeping Yoran hostage, I suppose. And, you know, and therefore it would give Noah, Lance, Uni, and Riku motivations for going after the guy because, you know, Yoran was their childhood friend. But keep in mind, for the majority of the game, Yoran was a free agent who was willingly partnering with Mobius D. It wasn't until the very end when Yoran started having a change of heart that Mobius D forced Yoran to interlink with him and in that sense kept him hostage. So in conclusion, Mobius D, despite having the same weapon as Momka, he's just not as developed or nuanced. His nickname is just thrown in at the last minute, which again, I cannot for the life of me remember what that nickname is. There aren't enough seed planted throughout the course of the game to reinforce his villainy. There aren't really any stakes involved with him, and overall, there's just no depth or nuance to him. He's purely one-dimensional. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with my points? Do you disagree with my points? Or do you have like a sort of different take to some of the points that I've raised? What points would you like to add that I haven't touched on before? Sound off in the comments below. Also, for those of you who finished the main campaign, what do you guys think of the story, like compared to the previous two entries, and even the Xenoblade Chronicles X, or some people say Cross? Do you agree that there's like some pacing issues and like there's a bit of a disconnect between, you know, the main campaign and the side quests and so on? Do you think, yeah, do you think some of the characters, like especially with Consul Chris, it was just like it felt really weird, like the lines that they wrote for him? Let me know your thoughts on how well they executed, you know, the story, the pacing, the villains, and the combat, and all that jazz. So with all that said, happy gaming, happy Mid-Autumn Festival, 中秋節快樂, and yeah, happy procrastinating. Thanks for watching and keep on procrastinating, so see ya. I wonder, if someone went to the dentist with teeth looking like that, what would they even say? It would just like immediately appoint them to some specialist. They just have to like sand the tips. You know when you're eating and then you accidentally bite the insides of your mouth? Ugh, imagine that. I know that's not a human form, but like, damn.